Long ago, when the world was newly woven, stories belonged to the Sky God alone. From high atop his heavenly throne, the Sky God, whom people call Nyame, kept all tales safely tucked away in a great gourd. Down on Earth, humans had no stories to share around their fires at night, and the only songs they sang were short and sad. Laughter was rare in those days, for the world had not yet tasted the sweetness of well-spun tales. Anansi, the spider, lived in a small hut on the edge of the village. He had a curious mind, so curious that each night he would gaze at the moon and wonder what secrets the Sky God guarded. If only I could hold the Sky God stories, Anansi told himself. Think of how the people would feast on them. Think of all the times they would laugh and learn. But the idea felt like an impossible dream. Nobody dare approach Nyame about such a brazen request. Anansi was no ordinary spider, though. He had more than 8 legs. He had a quick, clever brain that danced with ideas morning and night. One morning, with a glint in his eyes and a tuft of determination in his posture, Anansi left his hut and set off on a long journey up the highest mountains, stepping carefully through cloud forests and whispering winds until he reached Nyame's celestial domain. When Anansi finally arrived at the Sky God's palace of cloud and starlight, he was met by the imposing figure of Nyame himself. A tall, regal being robed in shimmering night sky, Nyame looked down in surprise at the little spider who stood before him. "What business do you have here?" the Sky God thundered. Anansi bowed low, his spindly legs trembling but his voice steady. "Great Nyame," he said, "I have traveled far to humbly ask for the right to share your stories with all living creatures." A deep silence spread across the sky. The clouds seemed to hold their breath. Then Nyame erupted in laughter, so loud it shook the mountaintops. "You think my stories are so cheap and simple that I would give them to a mere spider?" Nyame asked. The corners of his mouth turned up in amusement. "They are priceless treasures, spun from stardust and ancient wisdom. If you desire them, you must pay a price, an impossible price." But Anansi did not flinch. "Name the cost, O Great One. Whatever it is, I shall pay it." Nyame's eyes gleamed with mischief. He proposed 4 tasks, each so daunting that it should have been enough to send the little spider home. "First, bring me Osebo the leopard with the terrible teeth," he declared. "Second, bring me Mmboro the hornets who swarm in a deadly cloud. Third, bring me Mmoatia, the invisible fairy who dances in the shadows. Finally, bring me Onini the python, the cunning serpent as long as a river. Capture them all, alive, and bring them to me. If you succeed, my stories are yours to share. If you fail, you will be my servant for all time." Anansi's eyes widened, for he knew these were among the most fearsome creatures in existence. A lesser being might have folded before such demands, but Anansi bowed once more, determined to succeed. "I accept your challenge," he said. "Prepare to share your stories, great Nyame, for I will not fail." Anansi returned to Earth and immediately set to work. If he was to capture Osebo the leopard, he had to rely on wit rather than brute strength. A spider could not simply wrestle a powerful leopard, but perhaps he could trick him. That afternoon, Anansi found a deep pit in the ground, overgrown with vines and tall grass. With great care, he dug it deeper, fashioning a trap large enough for a leopard. Next, he wove a lattice of branches and leaves across the top, so cleverly disguised that it seemed like solid earth. Then he crawled out of sight to wait. Sure enough, at dusk Osebo the leopard came prowling by. When he trod on the lattice, it collapsed under his weight, sending him plummeting into the pit. The leopard hissed and roared, thrashing about to escape, but the walls were too steep and the pit was deep. At sunrise, Anansi appeared, smiling cheerfully. He peered down at Osebo with a concerned look on his face. "My friend," Anansi said, "you seem to have stumbled into a hole. Let me help you out." Osebo, caught off guard, squinted at the spider. "Why would a small creature like you help me?" "Oh, I cannot bear to see the proud leopard in such an undignified state," replied Anansi. "Wait here. I will fetch some rope." Anansi wove a sturdy rope from his web. Then, lowering one end, he coaxed Osebo to tie it around his waist. The leopard, in his desperation, followed instructions without a second thought. Once he was fully bound, Anansi left the other end of the rope tied around a stout tree. "Good luck trying to break free," Anansi murmured with a grin. He left the pit and returned later with a large wooden cage. With the help of two helpful forest creatures, an elephant and a rhinoceros who owed Anansi a favor, he hoisted the snarling Osebo out of the trap and into the cage. At last, the leopard was captured and the first challenge was complete. Next, Anansi faced a swarm of hornets called Mmboro, known for their vicious stings. To catch such creatures, one must outwit them. With a gourd full of water, Anansi tramped off to the tree where the hornets made their nest. Arriving at the foot of a gnarled trunk, Anansi poured water over himself, drenching his body thoroughly. He splashed the rest around the base of the tree, creating puddles that glimmered in the sunlight. Then, as the hornets buzzed overhead, he began complaining loudly. "Oh, what a terrible rainstorm. I can hardly stand in all this water." The hornets, curious and alarmed, flew down to investigate. "What rainstorm?" they asked, but they saw only a damp spider and some puddles. "It's been raining dreadfully." Anansi cried, "Look how soaked I am, and look at these floods. Why don't you take shelter inside this dry gourd I have? I am sure you will be much safer there." Mmboro, wanting to avoid a storm they believed was still raging, buzzed thankfully into the opening of Anansi's gourd. Quick as thought, Anansi plugged the hole with a wad of thick web, trapping the hornets inside. The second task was complete. Catching an invisible fairy is no simple feat, but Anansi had a plan. He molded a small wooden figure in the shape of a child and covered it with sticky gum from a special tree. Then he placed a bowl of the sweetest, most enticing mashed yams at its feet. He carefully positioned the figure in a clearing, concealing himself in the tall grass nearby. Anansi knew that Mmoatia the fairy, while invisible to most, could not resist the lure of sweet food and friendly company. Morning light broke across the clearing. Soon, Mmoatia arrived, drawn by the aroma of mashed yams. The fairy, intrigued by the wooden figure's appearance, called out a greeting. "Well, hello there, small one. May I share your yams?" The wooden figure, of course, said nothing. Mmoatia turned into a young child and dipped a dainty finger into mash and licked it. The fairy thanked the figure. Still, no response. Offended by the wooden figure's silence, Mmoatia tapped the figure's arm. At once, her hand stuck fast to the gooey surface. Shocked, she scolded the figure again, but it didn't reply. In her anger, she struck it with her free hand, and that too stuck. Kicking it only trapped her foot. Soon, Mmoatia, invisible no more, because she was struggling mightily, was stuck to the figure like a fly in honey. Laughing, Anansi hopped out of the grass and carefully wrapped the furious fairy in his silken threads. Onini the python was said to be as long as a river and as strong as 10 men. Anansi needed a plan that would trick the python into binding himself. First, Anansi wandered the forest path near the python's favorite sunning spot, talking loudly to himself. "I am sure the python is longer than this palm branch," he said, carrying a long branch's front legs. "But my wife says the branch is longer than the python. Who is right? I cannot decide." Onini, coiled nearby, overheard Anansi. Intrigued, the python slid closer, flicking his forked tongue in the air. "You dare compare me to a lifeless piece of wood?" Onini hissed. "Place it on the ground and let us see." Anansi gratefully stretched out the branch on the forest floor. Onini slithered to lie beside it, measuring himself from head to tail. "I see," said Anansi thoughtfully, "but you keep moving. Allow me to tie you to the branch so we can measure properly." The python, prideful and determined to prove his size, agreed. Quickly, Anansi bound Onini's body to the branch with silk threads and creeping vines. By the time Onini realized he was trapped, Anansi had knotted him tightly. There was nothing the python could do. The final challenge was complete. The great return to Nyame. With Osebo the leopard in a cage, Mmboro the hornets trapped in a gourd, Mmoatia the invisible fairy stuck to a wooden figure, and Onini the python tied to a palm branch, Anansi collected his captives and journeyed again to Nyame's glittering realm. It was a sight to behold. A tiny spider leading a leopard, a swarm of hornets, an invisible fairy, and a colossal python all at once. When he arrived, Nyame stared in utter amazement. He had never expected a mere spider to accomplish the impossible. "Sly little Anansi," Nyame declared, his thunderous voice filled with both awe and respect. "You have shown remarkable cunning. You have brought me exactly what I asked for. None in all the lands have proven themselves as resourceful as you." With that, the Sky God took out the gourd in which he kept his priceless tales. As he opened it, a warm golden light flooded the heavens and spilled down onto the earth below. Bits of sparkling magic swirled and drifted, forming the shapes of stories yet untold. Anansi nearly forgot to breathe at the spectacle. From this day forward, Nyame announced, "These stories shall be called the Spider Stories, for you have earned them with your wisdom and cunning. Take them, share them, and let them scatter far and wide among all peoples." Anansi bowed, tears in his many eyes. He gathered the shimmering stories as if they were precious jewels, tucking them safely into his traveling sack. Then he made his way back down to earth, his heart giddy with delight, the celebration and legacy. When Anansi returned to the village, the people saw the glow around him and gasped. Where once the nights had been silent and cold, now Anansi carried warmth and light in his sack. He set up a great celebration in the center of the village, inviting everyone to gather round under the night sky. He opened his sack and let the stories float out one by one. Each story rose like a small shooting star, drifting into the souls of the people who watched. They marveled and laughed. Some wept with joy, others clapped in delight. Children listened wide-eyed as these new tales took shape and danced in the flames of communal fire. From that day on, humans had stories to share. Stories of heroes and monsters, of friendship and loss, of gods and mortals and living spirits. The land filled with laughter and wisdom, as neighbors used these tales to entertain, teach, and remember. And whenever a child asked, "Where do these stories come from?" the elders would say, "They come from Anansi, the clever spider who outsmarted the Sky God himself." Anansi, for his part, loved to walk among the people, spinning fresh yarns under the shade of the baobab tree or in the warmth of family's hearth. He listened to how others retold his stories in new ways, each version sparking a different kind of wonder. Stories grew and multiplied, weaving together until they formed a living tapestry of culture and imagination. Even the fierce creatures Anansi had captured became part of these tales. Osebo's cunning, Mmboro's stings, Mmoatia's invisibility, and Onini's sinuous strength all found places in the grand mosaic of folklore. The moral of the tale: so it was that a small spider, armed with nothing more than intelligence, perseverance, and a cheerful spirit, managed to bring the gift of storytelling to the world. Through his adventures, we learn that size does not determine capability, and that what often prevails where brute force fails. More importantly, Anansi's journey reminds us that the stories we share, the laughter we give, and the wisdom we pass on bind us together as one human family. Even to this day, if you find yourself around a glowing campfire, telling or listening to a story, you may feel a friendly eight-legged presence at the edge of the firelight. That is Anansi, they say, still spinning new tales. If you listen closely, you might even hear him whisper a brand new story into the crackling flames, setting it free into the world, just as he once set free the Sky God stories.